In the Group B of Grand Prix, we had the game between Vladimir Fedoseev and Grigoriy Oparin. And the game started with the Catalan opening after d4, knight f6, c4, e6. Grigoriy Oparin was playing in the Grand Swiss and he was the third, and that's how he qualified for this event. And Fedoseev was in the semi-final of World Cup. This was the first important moment. Black went for open Catalan by dc4. White has plenty of options here. He has knight e5. White has also knight a3, which is a very interesting option, played by Magnus Carlsen against Giri in Tata Steel. You can check out that game in the Tata Steel playlist, which I have. Fedoseev chose the main move, the line which is played the most, queen c2. Now black plays b5. Tries to hold on to this pawn. Also here a6 is very interesting with the idea of queen c4, b5 and bishop b7, solving his issues with the bishop. And white can play a4 here, but there is also bishop d7 as a move. And if queen c4, then bishop c6 and have some knight d7, knight b6, and the position is really complex. Black chose to play b5 in this position. a4 by white, trying to break those queenside pawns. And now bishop b7. Black completely ignores the threat of ab5 and he tries to develop his bishop as soon as possible, because if he goes for c6, trying to be solid on the queenside to hold this pawn chain, then white can capture and cb5 doesn't work because of knight g5. All of a sudden there is a problem with the rook on a8. It's not possible to play knight d5 because of queen h7 checkmate. And black plays bishop b7. Now white takes on b5 and black plays a6 with a small trick. As I mentioned in some of my previous videos, if queen c4, ab5 is possible and white is losing a rook because the queen is under attack and also is the rook. But here white also has an option of capturing on a6, and if knight captures, which is the best, just giving up this c4 pawn, then white doesn't have too much. This variation was played in Warsaw, I think in Rapid or Blitz. Queen c3 by white, and now after c5, black's piece play compensates this missing pawn, and also the bishop on d5 dominates the position. And after something like this, knight e4 was played and knight b4, and this was the position from the game Nepomniachtchi against Giri. White's pieces are quite passive in this case, and it completely compensates the missing pawn. This b pawn is far from advancing and black's pieces are perfect. So in this position, Fedoseev goes for knight c3. Oparin took, we had an exchange of rooks, knight b5, and now the c4 pawn is still very loose. So Oparin does bishop d5 and Fedoseev plays rook d1. For example, if white plays bishop f4 to attack the pawn, that doesn't do much because black already wants to play c5, this pawn break. And after dc5, not to go for bishop c5 immediately because of b3, which could be a bit unpleasant because of the pin on the c file and black is just losing the pawn. But to go queen a5, and next to capture on c5, let's say knight c3, queen c5, and black is doing alright. But he went for this, and now again c5 is played by black, dc5, and now queen a5. Here, with the rook on d1, it was possible to play bishop c5, because in case of b3 now, there is queen b6, using the f2 pawn, which is abandoned at the moment, and also b3 pawn is under attack because the bishop is defended. So bishop c5 was possible actually in this case, with some queen b6 next, but also queen a5 is not a bad move. Knight fd4 by Fedoseev, bishop c5, and now they exchange bishops, and now b3. The good old pin on the c file, putting some pressure on the c4 pawn. The interesting move in this position was to play knight c6. The idea behind this is to just give up a pawn, but I'm not sure if black will be able to hold hold this position in practical terms. 4 versus 3 with bishop against knight. So he went for rook c8, tries to hold on to this pawn. Now Fedoseev took, and now bishop d4 first, because he wants to defend his c4 pawn. He wants to recapture on c4. That's why he takes on d4. And now knight d4. And black takes with the rook. Capturing with the pawn would just leave white with some ideas like f4, e4, and maybe putting some tremendous pressure on black's position. Also, knight f5 comes to mind with bishop g5, so that was not an option. He tried to stop e4 at any cost, and that cost was the weak d5 pawn. Queen goes to b1, and now knight bd7. Bishop b2. Now the bishop will become very unpleasant on this long diagonal. Combined with knight f5 and maybe some queen c1, queen g5 ideas, it will be quite dangerous for black. Queen b4 and now knight f5. The first step is done. The knight on f5 is very unpleasant. And now Oparin plays h5. Tries to somehow create counterplay by h4 at some point. Decreasing number of pawns in this position is favorable to black. Knight goes to e3. And now rook e4. Defending the pawn on d5 indirectly, because after this there is always rook e2. That simply doesn't work. So he went for queen a1. Tries to fix the d4 square and to not allow any push like d4. h4 by black, which is a very good move. And bishop d4 now, making a blockade on d4. After he blocks it, he's going to organize some attack on d5. But now black makes a huge mistake. He plays h3 here, which kills black's potential counterplay. And what I mean by that is that, let's say if black took on g3, takes, and he went back to e8 to defend, to just go back. And maybe have some knight c5 next or knight e4. Now in the case of f3 and trying to stop any jumps, then the g3 pawn would be a nice target. After this, knight h5, and at least white has to be careful about g3 pawn. Still, white is slightly better, but the position is far from over. But after h3, now after f3, rook e8, king f2, now white's king is too cozy and the g3 pawn is safe because there's a protection on with the h2 pawn. Plus, the h3 pawn is a potential weakness once the queen goes to f5 and hits the pawn. So now white's position becomes much better. And after a couple of more moves, queen e7, rook c2, rook b8, queen goes to a1, tries to stop any counterplay with rook b1, rook e8, queen goes back, queen c6, and now queen d3. He's heading towards f5, tries to hit the h3 pawn. Now queen b4, trying to stop queen f5 by attacking the bishop. Queen d2. Now the trade of queens is not very pleasing because after g4, king g3, he's going to capture the h3 pawn and then still have this weakness on d5. Queen goes to b1, which forced white to go rook c1 because of some queen h1 ideas. He goes back to g6 and now queen c2. Again offering the trade, terrorizing black with his queen. Again, this position is not so pleasing because of g4, king g3 idea, with which you can capture the pawn on h3. So black avoids this. But now it allows queen f5. Black goes to f8, rook c2 first. Now black just shuffles his pieces, but it doesn't help at all. For example, if black just waits with knight d7 from f8, now rook c7 is very dangerous, and after he goes back, there's rook c8. And after capturing, now you can see that the d5 pawn is quite weak, h3 is on the verge of collapsing, so black will very soon be 2 pawns down. Not a pleasant situation to be in. Also, there is a problem with knight f5, knight e7, losing the knight on f8, so it's not very pleasing. He went back to d7, but now he's losing the pawn. Queen g6, and now rook c1 back. Queen a6. Black tried to play for a couple of more moves, but he didn't manage to create any counterplay because the h3 pawn is just too weak and it's not possible to create something. So now queen g4 was played and g7 is under attack. So black played f6, but after rook a1, queen b5, rook a7, now the black's king is in big danger. Knight f5 is coming next. Knight e6, knight f5 was played, and after knight g5, Fedoseev played bishop e3, after which black is losing the pawn. Also, there is a threat of rook takes d7. Let's say if you just skip a move like rook f8, there is rook d7, and if queen takes, knight h6. Also, there is a threat of bishop g5, but not immediately because queen e2 is a threat, or rook e2. If you go king h8, there is queen h5, losing the rook. Okay, if king goes to h8, now there is also knight to g7. Discovered attack on the knight, everything just falls apart. That's why Oparin resigned in this position, because he's losing the second pawn, and that was enough for him. And that's it. If you got any questions, please let me know in the comment section. I will get back to you, and see you soon, and bye.